So we're in the middle of a series of discussions on the I am statements of Jesus found in the book of John. You recall there Jesus makes a number of claims concerning who he is, and does so in the context of these I am statements. I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, I am the way, the truth, and the life, I am the... hello, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Come in. I am the resurrection and the life, I am the vine, you are the branches, I am the good shepherd, and so forth, and so on. I wanted to pause in the middle of this to ask this question and to reflect on what meaning these metaphors of Jesus, that Jesus uses concerning himself, what would they have to be in terms of understanding of the God of the future? If you could dial yourself ahead, let's say 1,000 years to the year 3015, providing, of course, the end of the age had not come, and so forth. I don't want to leave you with a impression that I'm not a believing Adventist, but for exercise, think of the God of the future, the God of a millennium from now. And a group of faith friends like we are here today are sitting around and we are talking about God. What would they be saying about God, and what would their picture of God be compared to what ours is today? Maybe to put it another way, the question another way would be this: are these metaphors of scriptures describing these unique and enduring attributes of God, bread and light and the door, the shepherd, the resurrection of the life, the vine, and so forth, are they likely to be understood and have application for the future of God? Since the beginning of time, mankind has worshipped that which was powerful and not understood. The sun, the moon, stars, wind, fire, anything in the naturally occurring elements that mankind did not feel that he had control over were and often became objects of worship. As science advances, we have more and more data, we understand better and better the cause of things that we used to ascribe to God. Another way of saying it is that there are gaps in our understanding, and that's why we call God the God of the gaps. And throughout history, and throughout the history of mankind, wherever something was not explainable by or rationalizable by mankind, they would attribute that to God. But the gaps, as we've talked about before, keep getting smaller and smaller, more and more narrow. And our ability to penetrate the secrets of the world around us is increasingly real. Where does God go when all the gaps are gone? Or if not all gone completely, so few left that there is very little place wherein we can find God. When we studied the subject of truth, you recall, we indicated that for something to be true, it must be true everywhere, for everyone, in all ages. We also learned that truth must be discovered. Truth can never be invented. Truth is a revealed concept, something which always was there but previously not understood. The truth about gravitational forces has always been there, but it was only understood after an explanation by Isaac Newton. It is our natural tendency to link truth to data sets. And as data sets get more and more complete, or more and more filled up with data, the question is, where do we find God? As we spoke about last week, we were talking about the concept of I am the door. And we could see through our study that we come to find God and often meet God in the person of those who are in need. This is a core principle of the kingdom of heaven. And as you recall, we did many months ago have a long series of discussions centered on the book of Matthew chapter 18 concerning the core principles of the kingdom of heaven. This would be essentially the Magna Carta of the kingdom of heaven, the rules of engagement and of social discourse. Some of the ones that we talked about were the need for humility of leadership. Jesus says in the first part of Matthew 18, you must become as little children, so the last, in a sense, will be first. This is a principle of the kingdom of heaven. That the way of the kingdom of heaven is the way of grace. That if you don't understand the way of grace, then you're at risk for needing to pluck your eye out in order to not offend your eye to be offensive, or maybe to cut off your appendage if your appendage is offensive. That every member in the kingdom of heaven is important. The parable of the 90 and 9 and the one lost sheep, and how the shepherd goes out to look. Another core principle of the Magna Carta of the kingdom of heaven. That in the kingdom of heaven, conflict resolution is particularly important, and this is especially true if the offense is a personal offense. The passage says, if your brother sins against you, if it's a personal offense, then the need for reconciliation and how that should take place is outlined in that passage. That the principles of the kingdom of heaven here on earth are the same as they are in the kingdom of heaven in heaven. That is, that which is bound in heaven is bound on earth, and so forth and so on. So that, again, the concept that the heavenly order of things should be the earthly order of things in the kingdom of heaven here and now. And finally, that the principle of forgiveness is an essential element of the kingdom community. And you recall we had lengthy discussions on all of these pillars of community that we talked about in the context of the kingdom of heaven. The question is, does this Magna Carta, as it were, have staying power? Are these timeless principles which provide some kind of an eternal truth? So we've seen that the God of the future is at risk for being irrelevant if we only see God as a God of the gaps. Because, as we mentioned, the gaps keep getting smaller. That in all ages, mankind has sought to know the truth about God. This search for truth often, ideally, takes place in a faith community, in a community of faith. But the question remains, does God have staying power well into the future, given the closure of the gaps in terms of our scientific knowledge? The key strategy that God employs to be relevant is to be an asker of questions rather than an answerer of questions. Sometimes I think we're like a child who asks their dad, why do we have lungs? So the dad says, well, we have lungs so we can breathe. Well, why do we have to breathe? Well, we have to breathe so we can get oxygen. Well, why do we have to get oxygen? Because the cells need oxygen to work, and so forth. And this is the way we are with God, that almost like a hydra's head, that you cut the head off the snake and 4 more grow. The more questions you have that God answers, the more questions you have for God. And his his technique, his modus operandum, if you look at the Old Testament and Jesus in the New, is to rarely answer questions with short declarative statements. Rather, the most frequent response is another question. You recall God and Job going in a sort of a huge discussion concerning God and his prerogatives as relates to Job. And Job fires off question after question after question, even suggesting he will sue God and take him into court. And God never answers his questions, never answers one question, but he keeps asking him more questions. And in the end, Job is satisfied. But not because he's gotten answers, but because he's gotten an insight into the heart of God. Seeking to penetrate the ways of God, mankind fires one question after another at the God of the Old Testament and Jesus in the New. And as I mentioned, rare indeed is it that a short declarative answer is given. It's usually an answer that is answered with some other kinds of questions, a question which often takes the listener into a deeper and more mysterious relationship with God. And then we talked about the mysteries of God that probably will never be fully understood and never be fully answered. And I wondered, as I was thinking about this subject this week, dialing myself again ahead 1,000 years, would the mysteries that we spent so much time discussing still be the pertinent mysteries of mankind? We talked about those four mysteries: the mystery of godliness, or the mystery of goodness; the mystery of iniquity, or the mystery of evil; the mystery that God is the God of all mankind, the mystery that Paul says was hidden from the foundation of the earth; and the mystery that we shall not all sleep, but that we shall all be changed. These mysteries represent deep, fundamental, existential mysteries that mankind has had throughout the ages, and likely, perhaps, will have in the future as well. So here we have it. Mankind in all ages has sought the truth about God. What is that truth? And what will that truth be 1,000 years from now? That the faith community of the future will be established on the Magna Carta that Jesus gives about community. That the practice of religion, such as even prayer, as we spent so much time talking about, which is as old as ancient and as ancient as mankind itself, needs to have a thorough understanding of its role and its practice in the future of religion. Finally, what will the great mysteries about which we have spoken, will they still inspire a search for God? In 1 Corinthians 13, you recall a passage that we've mentioned many times. Love, in verse 8, love never fails, but there are gifts of prophecy. Where there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away, for we know in part and we prophesy in part. Notice that the religion of the future, which is based on knowledge or data sets, or even based on a prophetic paradigm, will not last. They will pass away, according to this passage. And yet we have so many passages in the Scriptures, from the book of Malachi, James, Numbers, the book of Psalms, and so forth, talking about the immutable and unchanging nature of God. That God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That He never changes, He never alters. And yet, our experience with God, our way in which we approach God, puts God, it seems to me, at some considerable risk unless we come up with a more comprehensive view of what it is to understand, or what it is to encounter God. And my question is it possible that 1,000 years from now, providing the end of the age hasn't come, that we can still have a meaningful and rich and deep experience with God, understanding more completely what His will for us would be, and particularly understanding more and more about the mysteries that we've talked about for the past several weeks.